Welcome to the second Realm of Roses Plotcast. At very irregular intervals, we want to put together important plot developments and recaps for you to listen to, from the perspective of the Realm of Roses, so that you can be up to date even if you can't or don't want to go to a con. This plotcast will tell you in great detail what happened at the individual events. We have some disclaimers about this, which we explained in detail in the first issue. Here's just a reminder. Disclaimer number 1. The summaries in the plotcast should not be seen as an unchangeable truth. Number 2. The summaries in the plotcast are not neutral, but from the perspective of the Realm of Roses. And number 3. We don't tell deliberate lies or misinformation. But enough of the introduction, we have a lot to do. Today we are talking about the Storm Nights, a campaign event we wrote ourselves that took place between the JDS and the Conquest, as well as the events of Conquest 2023 and the Saga of the Five Gods. The Conquest in particular is of course a huge chunk of plot, so there will be a lot to tell. Finally, we would like to summarize a few events between the years 2023 and 2024. And with that, time in. The Realm of Roses was at war. Undeath had attacked the heart of the realm. The realm's delegation that had traveled to the Convention of the Elements returned to a war-torn land. The Storm Knights. The sudden attack of Undeath against the northern border of the realm was soon dubbed the Storm Knights by the citizens of the realm. The reason for this was that the first days of the young war were accompanied by an exceptionally strong storm front, in whose shadow the undead attacked. There were still regular undead attacks against the northern border, which now had been effectively pushed back to the Heibel River. Almost the entire borderland had been conquered by the undead, and Hirschfurt and Zackenberg had fallen. From the Nachrichtenloch, we heard only isolated reports that they were well and able to defend their territory. There were also fights in the Red Moor, as well as in Aquehen and on the border of Zweiwasser. But our troops held out, and only near Aquehen was a lot of land lost to the undead, as the young fiefdom was not yet able to build any defensive measures. Since the cataclysm, leadership of the fiefdom had effectively fallen to the city lord of Caerhaven. This was done by the former Castellan, who left the continent during the cataclysm. The final order of the city lord before he himself fell in the battle was to evacuate the civilians from the fiefdom, so that Caerhaven, once conceived as a city of knowledge and wisdom, had now become primarily a base for the realm's troops, from which regular attacks against undead were carried out in the wild north of the fiefdom. When the first incoming troops and supplies eased the situation of the realm over the next few days, the most violent attacks gradually diminished. Control over the Heibel and the delta of the Mutterstrom were largely maintained. The heroes of the Realm of Roses used the time to plan the great campaign to the south, which, according to the Freischar's reports, would take them once again to the area of the ice wall. But before moving south, 2 more battles would be fought, the outcome of which would forever shape the fate of the realm. The Battle of Quingard. Quingard, the capital of the Zackenberg fiefdom, was inhabited primarily by imperial troops, after Zackenberg's citizens joined their leaders and emigrated to the south. Only a few civilians remained, especially those who had remained there after Kelemtal's departure as well. One of the first attacks of the Storm Knights was directed against the capital of Zackenberg. But thanks to these circumstances and the warning lights installed by the Zackenberger, a steadfast defense could quickly be set up in Quingard, and the remaining fiefdoms were informed of the attack. However, over the course of the stormy nights, Quingard remained one of the central locations of the conflict. Shortly before the heroes of the realm would move south through the ice wall, there was another major attack by the undead, this time aimed primarily at the Academy and the World Stone there. The World Stone, a powerful artifact from which one could previously enter Mitraspera's various elemental planes, had been secured in a chamber beneath the Academy. But when undead were able to enter the inner courtyard, the path to the World Stone was clear. Hope now rested on the Plates of Terror, who had come to Quingard, drawn by the promise of a good harvest for their blades. They managed to get to the World Stone in time before the undead, but something indescribable happened there. The stone, already badly damaged by the cataclysm, shattered in a magical discharge. What exactly happened to the blades down there is not known, but most of them disappeared and would only appear again when imprisoned by the undead at the ice wall. But Quingard's other defenders also noticed the destruction of the World Stone, which had also long-term consequences. In the days that followed, a mysterious force emanated from the Academy that almost immediately drained the life force of any being that approached the Academy. Worse still, first animals and later even weak-willed people were literally lured to give their lives on the wall or in the Academy's inner courtyard. The undead didn't seem immune to this either, as they seemed to be retreating, at least one ray of hope. A group of magicians and scholars from various fiefdoms had gathered in the ruins of Quingard and drawn conclusions. The World Stone had probably left a rift, like those found in the Helafian forests, a tear in Mitraspera's body that now had to be closed. But this rift was different than the one there. They called it the Call, the ever-increasing influence on living beings to move to the rift. After a night of deliberation, the mages decided that they must attempt to close the rift. But upon reaching the Academy, they realized that the call had already faded, and the rift had closed itself. They found the bodies of the Academy's last mages in the World Stone chamber, which now lay silent, artifactless and riftless. But this silence had its price. Every single being that had been inside the Academy when the accident happened was dead. The Academy yard was littered with small animals that were attracted by the call, and the land itself, as it became clear in the days that followed, was deprived of all elemental strength. Quingard itself would subsequently be repeatedly attacked by smaller squads of undead, which were repulsed by border troops. The commander of the troops is still Sir Antonius, who now also effectively administered the fiefdom, or at least what was left of it. But with each undead attack, the question grew louder. What if Viria decided to attack? The capital of the Black Dynasty threatened with its very presence, as it always had since the founding of the Realm of Roses. But the Black Dynasty had not yet intervened in the war. While most commanders thanked the elements daily that the dynasty didn't attack, some wondered, why didn't they? The Battle of Direguard. The Archon at least didn't seem to fear Viria. Scout reports indicated that the dynasty remained quiet and that the undead had made a major tactical error. The undead occupying the Direguard were few in number, and their reinforcements, after the successes at Zweiwasser and Zackenberg, had to travel all the way from the Red Moor. The rulers of the realm knew, as the first and oldest fortress in the realm, Direguard had not only a tactical but also a symbolic character. If the enemy retained the fortress, they would also dominate the surrounding forest, and any attempt to recapture it could take years. Freeing the fortress now, that it was not yet firmly in the hands of the undead, would shorten the war against undeath by years and save many lives. Though the Archon decided on a risky plan. Troops would intercept the undeath reinforcements, while a powerful squad of heroes, including the highest dignitaries of the realm, would move to Direguard to recapture it. The plan was to attack from 3 directions. The best equipped troops would storm the castle gate head-on. The magicians would penetrate through secret passages into the interior and weave magic from there, and the Archon would open the castle gate with the honor guard and defeat the commander Levrin Lakehart. At first it looked as if the plan would work. The undead were forced into the castle courtyard and decimated by spells, arrows and swords. But the undead crawled like bugs from the depths of the fortress, more and more. There seemed to be no end to Garvan's army. The fate of the Realm's troops was on a knife's edge, if the battle was not won soon. It became increasingly clear to them that something was lurking beneath the Direguard, a haven of evil that had now been awakened by Garvan. But then Archon Vincent reached his target on the castle walls. Commander Levrin Lakehart, an undead in horrific armor and imbued with Garvan's power. Vincent and Levrin exchanged blow for blow, and he seemed almost insurmountable. Retreat, it now resounded in the ranks of the Realm's troops. Ramirez recognized the situation. This fight could no longer be won. But it was too late. Now, the undead surrounded the remaining warriors and fighters of the realm. The situation seemed hopeless. They would all die here. But hope arose again when Vincent's scepter finally scored a liberating hit. The undead fell to the ground. But Garvan's will and his anger did not give in. Raised by unholy power, Commander Lakehart rose once more and brought the wrath of the king of the undead himself against the Archon of the Realm of Roses. 2 blows. 2 blows changed the fate of the realm. The first unbalanced Archon Vincent. The second cut through the arm that held the scepter of thorns. The Archon of the Realm of Roses fell lifeless into the castle courtyard, where the scepter struck the ground next to him. The Archon, the power of the land, was no more. But hope arises where it is darkest, where the scepter, wielded with the power of the land and blessed by all the inhabitants of the realm, had shattered the ground. Tendrils grew, thorn vines that with supernatural speed overgrew the castle courtyard, grabbing enemies and many unfortunate friends alike and tearing them apart with their sharp thorns. The will of the land itself in its most primal form. But the vines gave those who were still alive in the courtyard, including Niame, Tulhen and Nechesre and many heroes of the realm, the chance to escape. Archon Vincent had given them life. The realm's troops fled as the thorn vines began to overgrow the Direguard, driving away the last of the undead. But it didn't stop there. Tendrils were growing everywhere in the borderlands, attacking those who violated the elements. This elemental curse had spread to the entire forest. Although the land was protected from undead, most of the realm's inhabitants, as they learned, could only move in the forest under the protection of the Narich Tuloch. And the undead also seemed to learn how to remain unnoticed by the vines, because scouting parties were repeatedly spotted in this area. The forest had become dangerous. Since then, there have been few reports from the Direguard, which had now become the Archon's tomb. His body could not be recovered, nor could his scepter. Both had become part of the land there beneath the vines, a sacred place of the elements. The Realm of Roses didn't have much time to mourn, but one ceremony according to Sagarian custom took place, in which countless people took part. Oaths of the Archon were read, taken up and carried on by others, and then passed on to flames. The Archon lives on in those who will accomplish his deeds. This is the custom in Sagara. Stories are shared, wine is drunk, the Archon's life is celebrated. By remembering together, by laughing and crying, by drinking and eating in the harbor, the shared grief is alleviated. This is the custom in Sagara. And at dawn, the Archon's favorite horse was released into the shimmering plains of Sagara to be free as his master now is, because that is the custom in Sagara.
Conquest 2023. White lines on the eyes and faces adorn the troops of the realm, signs of mourning for their Archon, but also signs of determination to put a stop to Garwan's work. Together with a large army of allies from all places in Midraspera and beyond, the troops of the Realm of Roses move into the deep south, where the ice wall had revealed ancient secrets. The Boundless and their construct. Amid the rain and meltwater, ancient remnants of a long-forgotten civilization had been uncovered. Older than the culture of the old rulers, here we found evidence of the deeds and arrival of mages we previously knew only as the Boundless. In the middle of the area stood the construct that had brought us and the Dark Alliance here. An imposing structure that pulsated with magic and constantly drew life force from the land. We desperately needed to shut it down, but it seemed we weren't the only ones who wanted control of it. The Dark Alliance attempted to conquer the construct and use magical discs there. At the time, we didn't know for what purpose. After the initial battles over the construct ended, several beings appeared, echoes of ancient times, who appeared to be mages bound to the construct. They told us an incredible story, the story of the first settlement of Midraspera, in words that were difficult to understand. A war had broken out long ago on a continent further south, the continent of Zarkan. Magicians against magicians, some excessive users of the power of magic, others enemies of progress who wanted to severely limit the horizons of magic. The war reached its climax not far from the border of Midraspera, and the boundless mages found in Midraspera a seemingly endless source of strength. As the final battle of the war raged, the boundless mages retreated to Midraspera and built the construct they had lured us here. It was also, at this time, in a way unknown to us, that the mists that envelop Midraspera arose. However, the magicians called these mists prison and the walls of the Delevitum. The construct, the echoes could tell, was linked to a passage through the mists. The force that it drew from the land kept the passage closed. A reassurance for the boundless mages. If they, equipped with Midraspera's power, decided to reconquer the homeland of Zarkan, they could leave the Delevitum. To ensure that this would only happen at the right time, the Boundless gradually created tasks that acted as keys to the construct and were written on stone slabs throughout the area. We suspect that these mages eventually became what we call the Old Rulers. And we know that they never opened the passage, either because the construct was forgotten in the ice wall, or because they were never united enough to complete the tasks again. Our scholars began translating the stone slabs. The boundless mages had probably brought the languages we know as Old Mitrasperani with them to the continent. A total of 10 tasks had to be solved, one of which the undead had already solved. Each of these tasks seemed to revolve around some kind of virtue or a requirement for being worthy in the eyes of the various boundless mages who designed them. The tasks should not be mentioned individually here because what had to be done was too extensive and varied. But along the way, we gathered some insights about the Boundless. They valued creativity. One of the tasks was to complete a book of art, poetry, and music. They were determined. One of the tasks was to commit themselves to fighting for Mitraspera through a bond visible to all. They understood that an army that wanted to conquer the south also had to be fed. One of the tasks was to accumulate wealth. During the tasks, we also learned about some personalities and events. One task seemed to indicate that the magicians had given Mitraspera's elemental power a structure. Namely, it revolved around the first aspects of the elements, some of which were completely different than we know them today. We encountered the spirit of a boundless mage who described himself as the first friend of Mitraspera's elements, with a sign of a starry sky on the back of his hand. We got to know and hate Benesaria, Mitraspera's first healer, when she kept the whole group of healers in suspense during a triage with the illness she had created. And we faced further tasks before we had collected the 10 discs that were necessary to deactivate the construct. In addition to the key discs that rewarded these tasks, crystals also had to be collected. These were linked to shrines and banners on the meadows where our army camped. We realized that the magicians were not alone here at that time. What was left of their armies had set up camp at this exact location and contributed to the construction of the construct. While we were tackling all of these tasks, however, we had to contend with the Dark Alliance, who were trying to gain control of the construct, and who knows what they would have done with it. The tribes, the temples, and the pocket sphere. On the first evening of the campaign, various settlers found themselves in dreams, visions, in which both Continuum Adelphi and Adelphi appeared. Both parties were drawn to something that was unnameable to them when the settlers told them about it. But it became clear that it was kind of cry for help, asking people to choose between cold and gold. In the dreams, this showed up as a desire, but also as a concern of the part of both parties. None of the Adelphi present had such a dream themselves. There were a total of 4 dreams of different natures that gave clues to what would happen if the Adelphi went into the continuum. The next day, at midday, an object appeared in the middle of the Adelphi camp. Up to this point, no Adelphi had ever seen anything so beautiful. The attraction for all Adelphi was enormous. The object later revealed its name, Soul Spring. At the same time as the Soul Spring, 3 boxes and a book also appeared. There were tasks in the boxes. Soul Spring probably needed this fulfillment of the tasks in order to ultimately be able to decide on the future. The Adelphi present initially tried to take on tasks themselves, but failed. They forgot what the task was as soon as they read it. For this reason, the Adelphi asked the settlers for help. Those who wanted to help could choose tasks from the 3 boxes. Numerous friends of the Adelphi took on the tasks. On the second night, people had dreams again, always showing a different future. Soulspring's decision was communicated to everyone present through another dream on the second day of the Adelphi's people's first birthday celebrations after their reincarnation. Soulspring had decided in favor of the Adelphi and thus against the Continuum, and now wanted the bond. I am the source of all souls of the Adelphi. This binding was consummated on the last evening of the campaign. A seed found at the cradle of impermanence revealed memories to the people of the earth and their allies, suggesting, among other things, that the Narechtuloch were created as guardians of the cradle of impermanence and thus the cycle, and yet were used for other services by ancient rulers, including writing letters. This gave a clue as to why characters from a Narechtuloch script could be found again, even though the people vehemently rejected written words. The characters found finally completed the writing, and so the true name of the cradle, Cradle of Dusk and Dawn, could be found in the text. In the course of the campaign, 3 guardians and the Templar were appointed for the cradle. Lorian from Siegelstadt, Larsen from the Heartseekers, and Gerald from the Märkische Bund. The new Templar is the Narechtuloch Maler. On the last evening of the campaign, the soul of the temple was persuaded through a ritual to change into a vessel so that it could be taken to another location. Since the spring campaign, an eerie influence of terror had spread to the Naldar through the Temple of Dread. Their goal was to remove this influence created by the temple's connection to Tanar, creatures of terror. But Undeath had other plans. The undead kidnapped Esina and Haradir from the Naldar and planned to use Esina as Templar of the Temple of Dread as a focus to summon it. Haradir, who managed to free himself, was killed, appeared in the Naldar temple as a heap of ash, and was able to warn the Naldar and the settlers after his reconstitution. The ritual of undeath could be disrupted, but Esina died. The Naldar successfully summoned the Temple of Dread with the help of the settlers, but it was contaminated with undead energy, which spread to the entire people due to the Naldar's connection to the temple. Temple of Dread was successfully cleansed, which also removed the influence of the Naldar. Since the bond with the Naldar could not provide the temple with sufficient energy, it bonded to the land and drew energy from there. The portion of the Temple of Dread that appeared was later revealed to be the centerpiece of the temple. It was full of Tanar memories, which settlers were able to successfully remove. The appearance of the temple also changed. All the torn and worn-out parts of the temple were transformed into brilliant colors and shapes already known from the settlers' visions of the spring campaign. The Tanar influence had been removed from the temple. On the second evening of the summer campaign, the voice of the Crystal Throne rang out in the temple. She announced that Asamandra, who still ruled the temple, was hiding in the City of Ice, a magical place of legends, and therefore the connection could not be severed. She then sacrificed herself to destroy Asamandra and the City of Ice. The temple was subsequently repaired, which meant that the temple stopped drawing energy from the land, but continued to release energy in an uncontrolled manner. For this reason, magicians decided to reconnect the temple to the land in order to feed the uncontrolled energy released into the land. When the temple was connected to the land, the power reservoir began to provide energy to it. It felt like the land around the temple was no longer dying for the first time since the cataclysm. The Templar of the Cradle of Dusk and Dawn then felt that the Cradle also wanted to connect with the land, but not in this place. In the final ritual, the connection between the Naldar and the Temple of Dread was severed, and the temple was renamed the Temple of the Stormy Heart in honor of Mary. The temple later revealed that Temple of Change is its true name and that it would like to be called that from now on. The temple is balanced in all aspects, including horror, and is now a true Aeris sanctuary. The last temple guard could be chosen. Leandra of Wolfenau, Helric Schütze, Theoras Coldheart, and Sir Osmond of Sagara were the four winds that protected the temple. A new task will be to support the other temples in their change. The Templar Asina also wants to take on this task and was given a new name by the temple. She is now called Celia. Aqua's sanctuary could not be summoned. However, the heart of the citadel was on site. The heart of the citadel is a crystal from the Citadel of Life, the sanctuary of Aqua. It was created in Metraton Tool. A lot of Aqua energy was given to the citadel to combat influence the Forsaken. This formed the heart of the citadel. During this campaign, the Forasil primarily cared about the heart of the citadel. An aria was also written for the Dragonfly Queen to bring her down, which, unfortunately, didn't work in the end, but at least it made it possible to free Adam of Winterfeld from their clutches. The heart of the citadel was one of several elemental crystals held by the elemental peoples. These crystals could be charged at points on the battlefield to open an ancient lock. Amathea, an old ruler or boundless magician who had come to the continent with the first magicians, had created a pocket sphere within other spheres, a so-called pyxis in this place. With the power of 2 charged crystals, the axis could be opened briefly. Many incredible secrets and powerful artifacts that Amathea had collected and secured over time were found there, guarded by an Eliondar named Aura, a disembodied being of Magica. Invaluable knowledge about the continent's past could be collected here, but staying in the Pyxis was only possible for a very limited time. Strength had to be gathered again and again, but each success brought further insights. All the elemental people helped, but that was precisely why the lack of the people of fire became all the more obvious. crystal of Ignis was present and brought to the campaign. The crystal was found before the campaign by the fire dancer Lila of Oron in the Realm of Roses, and brought with her out of a feeling that it might be useful. Inside, with the joint efforts of various Ignis followers, it was charged to be used to open the pyxis. However, since no elemental people of Ignis were present, this failed. Afterwards, we discussed what could be usefully done with the collected energy so as not to lose it. There was a talk of summoning the temple as an option for using the crystal's energy, but this was discarded due to inadequate preparation. After the debate about the energy, it was finally decided together to carry out a ritual of the assembled community of Ignis on the last evening, with praise songs, fights, and dances by the fire dancers, in order to send out a call to a possibly resting, sleeping, existing elemental people of Ignis, and at the same time to ask the land and the elements themselves for new people. On the sidelines of all these events surrounding the elements, an old story came to its temporary end. Years ago, the weapons of shame were found at Lyra's grave. 4 elemental weapons of formerly beloved children of the elements who had brought upon themselves an ancient disgrace in the eyes of the elements. These weapons appeared last year and were seized by some fighters. They had to combat memories in the weapons and use the weapons for a new purpose. Back then, they wanted to make them weapons of hope. But now, when the weapons appeared again, they seemed weak and confused. Hope was not a fundamental aspect, and they did not know what they actually were and how they should follow. The 4 warriors of Adastra who had wielded the weapons the previous year showed the weapons that hope was not to be found in the immortal elements alone, but in the actions of mortals, and promised to wield the weapons as such. Filled with gratitude, the last painful memories of the previous wielders disappeared from the weapons, leaving behind 4 unmagical maces, now the weapons of hope. Artifacts only through their own history, not through magic, and only as powerful as their bearers and the hope they would bring to others. The Dark Alliance. In everything we, the Army of the Elements, did in this place, the Dark Alliance of Skargen, Undead, the Black Dynasty, and the scattered remnants of Pestilence and Ratio stood against us. But they also pursued their own goals. Undead had received an artifact from Garvan, an ancient cauldron that enabled an effective raising of undead. A good 24 could crawl out of the cauldron at once. Only later did we realize the true purpose of the cauldron. It was supposed to be used to create undead in Zarkan too. A horrible idea. Undead had already gained a seal of the construct with our arrival. A large number of their warriors died with the name of their master Garvan on their lips. We learned for the first time the ruthless strength of Garvan's new army structure. But we were still able to keep one of Garvan's special goals from him. His ring, now under the control of the Blood Pact, was handed over to warriors of the Western Seal on the battlefield and continued to elude Garvan's influence. The diary that we found on the ghost rock in the spring was finally captured and kept. In it, we found information about an ancient continent that had once broken into 3 parts. Mitraspera, one of the parts, can only be saved by finding the enigmatic's 3rd sister, once again confirming the goal of our search. In our battles against the undead, we also succeeded in freeing the Dreadblades trapped in Quingard, including Davion, advisor to the Nyami, from the clutches of the undead. They were bound by terrible magical chains, but our actions succeeded in releasing them. The Black Dynasty had set up camp in a nearby forest. There they grew crystals and strange mushrooms. Again, laboratory. What was the dynasty researching? At least with the mushrooms, the answers seemed to be found quickly. The mushrooms were food for the dynasty, something they didn't need before. Some warriors of the elements enjoyed such a mushroom, and most of them regretted the experience. The dynasty's change was also reflected in its willingness to negotiate with the warriors of the elements. At the studio, the warden's neutral place, court was held several times to exchange ideas with the dynasty. The Skargen occupied a strange tree on the battlefield and appeared to be carrying out tasks there. As a reward, they should receive access to an amulet of their god Askalar. However, some settlers kept getting ahead of them. When the final task was solved, the settlers were first able to claim the amulet for themselves, but eventually lost it to the relentlessly attacking Skargen. The Seedling and the end of the campaign. At the edge of the battlefield during all these conflicts, the Seedling took root again. This time it had occupied 3 large trees, but it also lost strength due to the construct, so it had to leave one of the trees early. Guided by the Seedling's family, the Seedling was strengthened until it gave us an important insight. The construct that stood on the edge of the battlefield had probably been moved away from its place of origin over time. The true core of the construct was invisible in the middle of the battlefield. The Seedling sprouted flowers where the center of the construct was, the only place where we could also shut it down and free the echoes of the construct. This was the final step that was needed. The last day of the campaign, all the crystals and all the key discs came together. The Seedling had shown us the correct location, and the shutdown process of the construct was started. Our troops and those of the enemy threw themselves against each other one last time, and in a battle that lasted hours, the construct was protected until all 4 cores, glowing pillars, were released. These could be brought to the true construct core, where the echoes also gathered. The 4 souls, who, as we had now learned, were the first to give up their being in order to protect the construct. We were the first of many safeguards that had now all been released, could finally be freed in this place. Sparks erupted from the construct, lighting up this evening sky, and slowly, very slowly, it shut down. The final battles ended, and we were finally able to celebrate our victories. At the end of the battlefield, the passage that would form when the construct was switched off slowly became visible. Layer by layer of the fog was removed, revealing an area marked by chaotic, wild, jumbled magic that had been held there for an unimaginable long time. It would take time for the passage to be large enough, and we knew we would return in about a year. And somewhere far beyond this zone of chaotic magic, a new continent awaited us. Sarkhan.
A Saga of the Five Gods. In the fall, after most of the elemental forces had recuperated in their respective homes, Acheron reached out to us with a request and an offer. Our enemy, the Skargen, was still a mystery to most of us. Far too little was known about them, their motives, their way of life, or their homeland. An expedition to Rinland, that was Acheron's suggestion, and many allies heeded the call. We set out from Mitraspera with several ships and followed a Skargen fleet through the mists. But after a few days, a huge storm appeared out of nowhere and caused our ships to capsize. Miraculously, all of us were able to escape to the shore of an island where the expedition set up camp. But it soon became clear Skargen were also stranded on this island, and strange ruins of Skargian design promised secrets. Spirits appeared in the night, performing echoes of ancient rites, ancient traditions of the Skargen. The ghosts seemed harmless, but soon threatening shadowy creatures appeared, with sunken eyes and bony skulls, the spawn of Skivari, the goddess of darkness. In order to survive, a fragile truce was negotiated with the Skargen, supported by a Skargen who described himself as a speaker of law. From these negotiations we were also able to find out where we actually were. We were on Holmgang, the playground of the gods, which only appears when the gods, or one of them, wanted it to. We looked for an oracle that could be found in the middle of a lake on this island. In exchange for some favors, they gave us instructions for a ritual that was supposed to show us truths. Meanwhile, however, the mood in the Skargen camp escalated. Dissatisfied with the deal and the ceasefire, the speaker of law was executed in a cruel ritual. During the night, we learned an important clue about the importance of the Skargen artifacts that they had been looking for a long time. Whoever brought all the artifacts to Holmgang would be given enough power to fight a powerful evil. The next morning, we were able to perform the oracle's ritual and learned that Askalar, a Skargen god of deception, was trapping us in his illusion. But we knew a way out. A drink from Acheronian Fae, but one element to brew, it was missing. An item from Askalar himself. The oracle promised to give us such an item for our people pass the test of the forest. Our warriors successfully returned from the forest where Skivari's beings had been waiting for them, the amulet of Askalar in their possession. In the evening, the drink could be distributed and drunk, and the oracle promised to protect us. And the drink worked. For the first time we saw the true face of Holmgang, a place of death, full of bones and skulls, the traces that the gods had left on their playground. But we were happy to see that our ship was safely anchored on the coast. The way home was secured, but we weren't the only ones who were free. Fufrun, the goddess of winter, was also freed by our actions, and in gratitude she spared us, but also threatened her wrath if we came back. We decided not to linger any longer, but the night before we could set sail, the Skargen's terror manifested itself one last time. As part of their celebrations, the Skargen kidnapped one of our own. Ansgar, a protector of healers and alchemists, was sacrificed in their cruel rites. The end of the year 1323. The year 1323 ended largely peacefully in the Realm of Roses. Still mourning the fallen Archon, we could at least see the effects of some of our bitter victories. Mitraspera's rapid decline slowed noticeable. Anchoring the Temple of Change and shutting down the construct gave the country much needed time. We thought together all year long in the name of the elements, and the elements showed us their gratitude. Some of us even received a token of friendship. Malo of the Grey Souls became a friend of Terra. Vite Münzer, Baron of Schönweiler, became a friend of Magica. And Davion, Dreadblade, advisor of the Nyami and all-around talent, became Aeris' friend again. Many more of our friends stood out, enough to see a sign of the elements, a spark that showed them they were on the right path to the elements. The war against undeath on our northern border was in a stalemate. Although undeath was no longer advanced any further, it also seemed hardly possible to reconquer the lost territories. Winter was always a time when the settlers were at a disadvantage. We knew that only too well. The only place where fighting was still going on was the devastated Kingguard. Under the watchful eyes of Sir Antonius, one undead squad after another was repelled, but without being able to establish a secure peace. Luckily for us, the Black Dynasty had still not intervened in this war. If Viria were to extend her claws against the Realm of Roses, it's hard to imagine what would happen to us. But why? Why didn't Viria attack, even though scouts had already seen movement in the capital of the Black Dynasty? A question that was asked more and more. Some rumors said that during the first attacks, high-ranking figures in the realm's military were ordered to worry only about undeath, as if the threat of Viria had been forgotten. Another mystery was the dreams that some of the realm's inhabitants had. Dreams of mighty thorny vines rolling through the land. A feeling of pride, security, and yet images that didn't want to fit in. Finally, in the spring of 1324, reports reached out that the Narichtoloch had found the place where the Cradle of Dusk and Dawn, until recently called the Cradle of Impermanence, would be anchored. A place not far from our capital and even closer to Viria. A place that some have called the Valley of Impermanence. When warnings were sent that the enemy was gathering there, it became clear to us. We would have to go there beyond the borders of our realm, north to Heart Lake and Direguard, the land that undeath had taken over in the spring in the previous year. And suddenly, Garvin's war no longer seemed like a mere act of revenge. What was it he was looking for up there? And how should we withstand him this time, without an Archon? But something was different. Many allies would also follow the Narichtoloch's call, and together, yes, together we would be able to endure.
Our second Plotcast ends here. We hope you enjoyed it. Once again, we have not mentioned most domestic political things. If you are interested in something like appointments of new dignitaries of the realm or relationships between the fiefdoms and allies of the realm, we can also include that in the Plotcast in the future. Thanks to Steffi's help, we were able to better incorporate the tribes plots, which had been neglected a little in the last Plotcast. Amber and Philip also helped us put together points about elemental game content and the Friends of the Elements. Many thanks to all of them. Please let us know if you were missing something or if you experienced a cool story in the last year that you would like to share, either here directly on Discord or on the comments on Facebook. If enough stories come together, we can put together a What We Forgot or What Else Happened edition of the Plotcast after the JDS. Otherwise, the con season, starting with the Chronicles, is already around the corner. We hope to see many of you at events and experience great adventures with you. Apart from the What We Forgot edition, the Plotcast will take a break for the time being until the start of the next season. At this point, many thanks again to our wonderful community who make this world exciting and lively. Many thanks to all the helpers who pitch in wherever they are needed. Many thanks to everyone who helped create the Plotcast, translators, speakers and authors. If you would like to help us, get in touch, and otherwise, see you next time. Time out.